Now, Nigeria has reopened a dispute that caused freight costs to soar and some tankers to avoid its waters by demanding that shipping companies pay unpaid tax bills totaling millions of dollars. The largest crude producer in Africa stated that shipping lines that do not reside in the country and take oil should pay their notices by December 31. An industry group made the assessments public in June. Zacch Adedeji, chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, said on Tuesday that he urged the international shipping companies that are not compliant with Nigerian tax laws to begin to do so immediately. At this point, I'm being joined by Kassimu Garba Kurfi, CEO at APT Securities and Funds, and you'll be talking to us from Lagos. Kassimu, it's nice to have you around.
Happy to have you.
Now, the state-owned Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, a committee of oil sector regulators, and the President's office were then formed to balance the company's responsibilities when it comes to tax payment. It is the source of the current findings. So, are those who were involved earlier not also responsible for the lack of remittances to Nigeria or the delay? Can we say that they are to be blamed in the laxities when it comes to taxes to be paid?
Well, if you remember that January 2022, Federal Inland Revenue issued a memo to all IPBC, that is International Petroleum based companies, to regularize their tax on or before the end of the month February 2022, which has since many of them failed to do. Now, the Federal Inland Revenue and Services issue a memo that any company that is doing business with the Nigerian must show TCC, tax clearance certificate. And for you to show a tax clearance certificate, you must have clear all your outstanding tax. What it means, they now follow up by issuing them the demand notice for the tax of all the shipping companies that had business with the Nigerians from 2011 to date. And this run into billions of dollars. Remember, there is a reciprocate where we have Nigerian shippers company that take product into the other related company, that we look at the reciprocate. What tax relief do they give to our shippers so that we can give them? But now, we don't have. There is nothing like Nigerian shipping company. And therefore, all those tankers that deal with the Nigerian petroleum product, they need to pay tax. And the implication of this, if care is not taken, it may bring scarcity of the petroleum in the very near future. Because most of these tankers, most of our refined product, we get it imported. And the tankers that have all these outstanding shippers, they will have a liability to settle or decided not to come to the Nigeria. And if they choose not to come to the Nigeria, that can bring scarcity into this. But remember, the tax law, section 14, permit the Federal Inland Revenue to tax any shipping company that do business with the Nigeria, either through lifting the crude oil or through importing the refined product into Nigeria.
Okay, so when we look at Nigeria's tax revenue as a share of gross domestic product, when we look at it, it's just about 11% and it's said to be one of the lowest in the world. Now, the continent's most populous nation, that is Nigeria, set up a presidential task force some time back to boost that share to about 18% within 3 years. Now, when you consider their performance and their level of regulation and ensuring compliance, would you say that they've started on the right track? Would you say that they've been optimal in their performance? Because, of course, you talked about the tax laws and implementation will always be key. But then we see some shippers or some oil companies circumventing or running away from their financial obligation to Nigeria. So would you say that they have actually performed well, or they are just those who are out there looking for ways to escape what they're meant to pay in terms of taxes to Nigeria?
Well, for that one, we say they started in the right track. But remember, our low performing tax revenue to the GDP has nothing to do with the collection, but more of the way and manner we gather our information. We specifically rely much on the Federal Inland Revenue. the state, the local government revenue are not all put into consideration. If all the taxes are put into consideration, I believe achieving beyond 8 to 10% that currently we are moving to 18%, they are on the right track, but we need to make sure that all other taxes are put together as one, because you cannot leave the state tax revenue, ILA revenue, the local government revenue aside. You only concentrate on the federal ILA revenue. So there is a need to change the composition to take all the tax revenue sources by the local government and the state and the federal ILA revenue. In any way, this very particular one, the shipping. Remember that most of our products consumed, especially the petroleum, are imported. So if we now come back, you say they must pay tax, which they ought to pay tax. What it means, the cost of the product will be much higher than what it is today, because most of these importers are NNPC and what? And who pay the tax? The buyer of the product. So if you import the product and you say pay tax, NNPC will pay tax. So either the government will increase their subsidy, or alternatively, the price of the petroleum in the market will go up, because it's either of the way. You cannot take it and leave it. If you insist for getting your tax paid, they will pay you in dollar, but the cost of the product bringing into the country will much go higher. And that's what it means, that we are likely going to see a new price for the petroleum. Even now, if you go to the filling station, you hardly get it less than 600 naira. But that is the beginning. By the time they enforce the tax into it, it means that every liter will get much higher than what they are paying now.
Well, Kurfi, the tax bills for foreign shipping companies are part of the strategy for achieving a goal when it comes to harmonization and tax payments. Now, there's a deadline for December. Do you think that that deadline is feasible?
I doubt much, but let us see to what extent they can achieve that. My sincere advice for the Nigerian Shippers Council, we need to do private partnership. Nigeria, this is a billions dollar transaction. Bringing product into Nigeria, lifting product into Nigeria, pay billions yearly. And there is no reason why Nigerians cannot have Nigerian shippers participating easy, even in the private partnership. We need to be there. It's not like airline. So many aviation that we can get tax into the Nigeria, and Nigeria need to raise up to their tax. If they do so, I believe that the federal revenue will get more revenue. But meeting of the target from now to December is a equivalent tax, but we hope that they can achieve to some level.
Okay,
not much.
Well, it's common practice when we look at it that many nations give tax rebates to attract investors. Is this applicable now to the tank owners plying Nigeria's waterways?
Well, let me tell you, I do not see much on the tank owners, because tank owners come and lift crude oil. And crude oil is one of our major products. So why don't we pay tax? If we tax the crude oil, it's not Nigerian that is paying, it's the buyer of the crude oil that is paying. The only reverse side of it is the white product, because we don't have a refinery function. So therefore, now the refined product has to be imported into, and that is where the tax will be more heavy to us.
Okay, I'd like to also find out from you, Kurfi, before we go, would it be possible that these tax disputes be taken to the various countries of origin of these particular companies? Similar arbitration occurs with all contracts that both parties engage in, so something is binding on that. So if they are able to escalate it to other countries, do you think there could be some sort of solution?
Well, that may be a solution if we have Nigerian shippers. But since we don't have Nigerian shippers, these are private companies. Go into this business, they should pay. Even if you escalate it to other countries, it is not going to add much, because this only exists where we have Nigerian shippers. So we now do a reciprocate. So what are you relieving me, my shippers? What will I relieve your shippers? But Nigeria doesn't have shippers now. So for me, the federal government should go ahead and tax this. They are private companies, they have to pay, because Nigeria is not an exception. There is no any other country you do business with them without paying tax. It is the law. Not only in Nigeria, it's not exceptional. The only thing that, we have African free trade zone, I hope that this will be relaxed to the shippers that are within Nigeria, Africa. But most of African countries, they don't have ships. They only get ships registered in Liberia, not owned by Liberians.
Well, I guess that's a big issue for Nigeria there, of course, even as it is considering a revenue mobilization drive in that line. But then you still also want to consider the costs when it comes to the final consumer, whether or not they would have to pay subsidy, whether or not the price will go up, whether or not it will be available and it will be affordable for the consumer, and whether or not the shippers or the tankers will be able to afford the payment, of course, in terms of taxes that are needed. Well, those are big issues that we'll get to consider subsequently on the show. Kassimu, Garba, Kurfi, CEO at Securities and Funds. It was nice talking to you.
Thank you for having me.